Well, y'all, Alina and I have been having so much fun here at the Business of Boutique Fitness that we decided to turn our extraordinary thoughts, ideas, and much more into 3 episodes. So if you've joined us for episode 1 of what to do when it feels like your studio is starting to fail, you are now on episode 2. Knowing all of this, what is your version of burnout?
Quite similar to yours, actually. And I think mine has changed over a period of time through circumstances I've been through in my businesses. Yeah. I've always considered myself as someone who's had high resilience. Yeah. And everyone around me has always told me I've been really resilient from when I was a child right the way through. Yeah. And even my aura ring tells me I have high resilience. But I think because of that, sometimes I wasn't as aware of how I was feeling in situations because I've always been someone that, yes, I have moments where I fall below the line and I kind of feel sorry for myself, blame, deny. We all have that. But actually, most of the time, my mentality has always been, I might have like an hour or so of feeling sorry for myself, but then I will, something will switch. And I'm then like, okay, how do I change this? What do I do? And I've never been afraid of making bold choices and big decisions. And it's not always easy. It's not always something that we're comfortable with, but ultimately we don't grow within our comfort zone. And for me, one of the things that I've had to focus on as, individually is how do I recognize those signs? And for me, a couple of things that were really pertinent that you said was around when I'm starting to resent and feel frustrated with work is something, and it takes a lot for me to get there. But when I start feeling that, when I'm starting and the big thing is not being able to switch off. I've always been someone that I don't abide by the Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. Never have. I don't think I ever will. But when I'm with my children, I want to be as present as possible. And there's times where I may have to take a phone call, that's fine. But when I can't physically switch off and I'm frustrated over and I can't stop thinking about a certain thing or something that's happened or a part of the business, I can tell that's an early stage of my burnout. And I think being aware of those things, those small signs, those, that kind of feeling slightly more anxious about things, not sleeping as well. And everybody responds differently. Yeah. But they are certainly quite a few similarities there from what you said that I certainly feel. And I think it's being honest with yourself. No one wants to feel that, and it's not something it's not a badge that we want to wear proudly and say, I'm burnt out. But actually, most business owners do go through it at one point, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. Being a business owner is
this is a very normal.
So normal.
This is a very normal thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having someone to talk to that's not within your family is really important, to be able to ask for honest feedback, but also to share when you have got those frustrations, when you are feeling anxious. They are your sounding board, and that could be a friend, it could be a colleague, it could be another studio owner that you've built a relationship with over time. I think that's quite important, but I think you've got to be willing to self-reflect. You've got to be willing to ask for feedback and not afraid of hearing something you might not want to hear.
So as I was going to say is that sometimes you're going to hear that there is a real problem. And by the way, I'm going to give you the I don't know, maybe the best thing of all. The moment you know there's a real problem, you actually have something to fix. To me, that's like when the weight comes off your shoulders to some degree, because you can actually attack what's really an issue. Sitting with this amorphous, I don't know what's wrong, I don't want to know what's wrong, I don't want to understand what's wrong, that is way more dangerous to your psyche than actually just looking at this. Now, let's dive in for a hot second to diagnosing the root problem on this.
Yeah, so I think the key here is don't guess, assess. So it's simple. Yes, we have our gut feeling, and that's important. Intuition is important, but actually in this case right now, it's exactly what you said. Lock yourself away for a week and take a really deep dive into your business. Look at every single metric, ask for feedback, speak to clients, assess every single working part of your business. And don't be afraid to uncover and lift the lid on perhaps something that is going to not give you the answers you want. And I think sometimes, and we see it in the medical field, some people won't go to the doctor because they're scared of what they're going to be told. It's a little bit like this. Yeah. But if you are genuinely still passionate about this business and it's something you want, then dig deep, take it on, ask for that feedback, dig into those numbers. And that's everything from assess your product. Is it the right product? Do you have the right modalities, class mix? Has it become outdated? Has it become, are your members bored of it? Are your instructors bored of teaching it? Is it a people problem? Do you have a cultural issue within your business? Do you have the right people doing the right things in the right places? Are you leading in the right way? Are you the root cause of that problem? Is your marketing correct? Do you have the right sales processes? Is there a problem? Have you got a leaky bucket? Is it your retention? So looking at all these key elements, and I think there's a lot of data you can analyze. Most CRM systems that we work with can provide you with a good amount of data. But some of this has got to come from actually speaking to people. So what I would do in this scenario is I'd be having one-to-ones with all of my team. Absolutely. I would be taking them away from the studio, having a coffee with them, and really getting to the underneath the skin of how they feel about things. And when you have those conversations, as long as they do feel safe having those conversations with you, and if they don't, it's going to be pointless. And that's not something you can fix overnight. Psychological safety takes time to develop. But if you've created a culture in your business where they feel that they can share how they're feeling, they can give you feedback, and most importantly, that they can make mistakes, because like you said earlier, we all make mistakes, and that then there's no fear of ramification and judgment, that it's actually seen as an opportunity to grow, then they will share with you how they're feeling. Yeah. And the same, ask your members. And I think most importantly, when you ask for feedback, whether it's to your members, to your team, to your family, to your friends, when they give you that feedback, how you react is the most important thing. And I think understanding the stages we go through when you receive feedback, you are potentially going to be shocked by some of it. You are going to feel anger. You are going to feel resentment. And there's going to come a point where you do accept it. And some people move through that within a couple of minutes. Some people take weeks, if not months. But acknowledging that those feelings are normal is the first step. But then secondly, the most important thing I always say to people when you get feedback is just say thank you. Don't try and argue it. Don't try and kind of persuade them that's not the case. Their feelings are valid. They've taken the time and they obviously care for you enough to share how they feel. So there's got to be some validity in that. And you might not fully agree with what they've said. It doesn't matter. All I want people to do is take a breath, say thank you, show them that you're going to take away and consider that. Don't deny it. Don't argue it. Just take it, own it. And then once you've got to the stage where you can move to the point of acceptance and you've had time to process that information, there will be takeaways in it. And it might not be every single piece you feel is right, but actually, if that person cares enough to give you feedback, there's something there.
I think it's really important to recognize, I love the thank you piece of this. That's probably the number one reason, if you don't do this, that people won't give you feedback again. And that willingness to have the graciousness and gratefulness for the good and the bad. There's truth in a lot of things, and it's hard to hear them, but much harder than having to deal with the consequences if we don't. Now, let's assume I've got all of this. I've taken this time. I've gotten the feedback. I've dug in deep. Now it's time to create a turnaround plan of some way, shape, or form. And I would say the vast majority of things can be maybe not fully righted, but they can be on their way to the rights within about 90 days. Now, this may mean that you're going to be thinking about things like you listed 3 phenomenal things earlier. It was people, marketing, and product. There's a good chance that you're going to have some significant changes in all 3 of those things. And I think, in my way of doing this, it's sometimes just thinking like, what do you need to do first? Now, in your mind, critical thing, what's the critical first step?
I think for me, it's stop the bleeding. If you've got to the stage where your business is losing money or very close to losing money, and you can see that perhaps next month you can't make payroll, the first and most critical thing is to stop the bleed. And yes, you can dive into your marketing, but that's not going to be an immediate turnaround. Yes, you can dive into changing your class programming. Again, not an immediate turnaround. All things that will have to be done. But actually right now, the most critical thing is to make sure that your expenses are less than your income. And that's a really hard thing to do. But you have got to pause all non-essential expenses, if I could speak, pause all non-essential expenses and make those difficult decisions. Yeah. And you've either got to cut or reduce your overheads. And yes, we want to be able to outsell this moment, but right now that's not going to happen overnight. So the quickest thing you can do is think about things that have crept in. So really go through, and I've done this with clients before, grab a highlighter, pull off your P&L with detailed breakdown of all your costs. I want to look at every single tech cost you've got in your business, any marketing costs, and do not cut your marketing costs, please. Again, far too many people do this. It's not going to help. It's only going to reduce your sales in the long run. But those costs that aren't going to impact the growth of your business, and either they might make your life slightly simpler, it might be a piece of software that helps you do X, Y, Z, and it's costing you $200 a month. That's $200 that, yes, you'll want to reintroduce at some point in the future if it is deemed necessary. But actually right now, that could be an expense that you can reduce.
And even asking for things. Ask your landlord for a break for 2 months.
Yeah.
Be willing to reach out if you've got certain team members that have been wanting a break for a period of time and saying, hey, we're going to do a 60-day hiatus. Ask your software companies. A lot of them will reach out and give you some type of abatement on this one. In fact, all you have to do is think about what you've done when you tried to cancel cable or your cell phone or whatever. People will throw all kinds of things at you on this. So if you can go to them with that request, there's a lot of things that just for a short period of time, you can just brutally reduce by saying, hey, I'm just going to ask for this and try to get 60 days to start my turnaround time on this. Now, you touched on the sales piece of this because normally this is the time where I do say, okay, this is one where we like to get quick and dirty, where we like to go after every piece of low-hanging fruit and bring in as much cash as possible. And we've done this with enough people who've come to us saying, I'm really at a dark place. Like, what do I do? And guys, important to know, dark places can come when you're making $100,000 a month. It can come when you're making $10,000 a month. Profitability is not guaranteed at either of those dollar amounts. In fact, I see as many people not profitable at $100,000 a month as I do at $10,000 a month, which is almost terrifying in this one. So this is going to be a case where I'm going to keep my marketing spend, but I'm going to invest in low-tech ways to reach out, or low-spend ways to reach out. I'm going to make a list of all of my lapsed clients that should still be with us. I'm going to reach out to them directly. I'm going to ask them to coffee. I'm going to invite them in for classes. I'm going to do a killer win-back campaign. I'm going to look at things in my client journey that may be dropping people off very quickly that I can change immediately. I'm going to turn to my instructors and I'm going to give them an incredible referral offer and say, hey, over the next 60 days, this is what I need help with on social media. This is where I go. I'm going to ask for things that I probably should have been asking for all along, but I'm really going to set this up. And then I'm going to start tracking how well they actually work and perform. Metrics that you want to track during this 90-day phase. What would you want to track?
So I think it depends on what they've identified as the root cause of the issue to a degree. But ultimately, on a broader brush spectrum, you want to be tracking your revenue. You want to be tracking your recurring memberships, your leads, your sales. Any campaign-specific metrics. So if you have introduced a win-back campaign, a high-ticket offer, you want to be tracking the success of those. And just on that note, there's some real opportunity there. I had a client who I worked with decades ago who's actually not in the leisure industry, but he came to me, must have been about 3-4 months ago, and said, I think I'm going to have to close my business. Wow. I cannot. He's been bleeding for months, head in the sand, done nothing about it. Finally got to he came to a talk of mine earlier this year, and he pulled me aside afterwards and went, everything you've just said has resonated. I am that person. I've got a month. I've got a month to turn this around, otherwise I can't make my rent, my payroll, nothing. He was in such a dire situation, and he didn't have a true grip on his numbers. He was estimating a lot of those costs, but I got him to go through that process of that deep dive. But what we did then was we put a high ticket offer in place, and the revenue he drove, it hasn't solved all his problems long term. There's still a long way to go, but it gave him the time on it, or a band-aid, that gave him the time to be able to fix it. And I think in that case, what we looked at then with him was the results of that campaign, how he then turns those people in that high ticket offer into long-term members. So those metrics, I want to be looking at my class attendance. I want to be looking at my reviews. There's lots of data that you can gather to get a sense check on how things are improving and what that looks like. But ultimately, the number one number as a business owner that you need to be looking at is your revenue and your costs, because that's going to be the difference between making it and not making it.
So true. So true. Biggest issue on this, you're going to have a team that's used to something very different. Team buy-in is a conversation I feel like I have an awful lot, especially because in boutique fitness, it feels like an awful lot of people operate as lone wolves. You know, we're an industry of independent contractors. We're an industry of people who want to go their own way. We're an industry of people that are sometimes very suspicious about authority and leadership and all of these things. So when you suddenly come to them and you're like, we're making a change, I think we can expect that there's some people that are going to really push back and say no. So knowing this, what would you say is the first most important step to having as many people as possible say, I'm all in?
I think it goes back a stage. It's not telling them what's going to happen. It's actually involving them earlier on in that process. And for me, it's about getting that buy-in, is having a really transparent approach in your business. So whether they're an IC or whether they're an employee, why aren't you sharing with them throughout the whole of your journey how you're performing, what your key metrics are, where you're at as a business? Because like you say, people speculate. So you get two ends of the spectrum. If they think that something's not going the right way, they will panic that the world is ending, they're losing their jobs, and they'll start looking for other jobs. So you have that side of the extreme, and often that's not even the case. It might well be, but it may not be the case. On the flip side, you have someone on the front desk who may be going, well, I know that you have X classes a week with X spaces, and the drop-in rate is X, so you must be making X, because they don't think about the bigger picture. So something that I think is so important is don't be afraid to share with your team your targets. And then most importantly, don't be afraid to share them the results. And yes, you're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of payroll and other elements of the business, but there is absolutely no reason why all of your team members shouldn't know your revenue, your profit, and how your business, the health of your business.
It's called transparency. It's very, very, very simple. By the way, transparent pricing makes this incredibly easy.
Absolutely.
Transparent pricing is where you literally say, a private Pilates session costs $125. This is where the $125 goes. A class costs $45. This is where the $45 goes. That is basic. And by the way, that's not just nice for your team to know, that's nice for your clients to know.
Absolutely. And I think people are afraid to admit that they're profitable and that they have a successful business in some ways. And yes, the majority of people in this industry are set out to do this because they have a passion. They genuinely care about the health and well-being and making us a healthier population. They care about longevity. You know, they are great human beings who really want to make a difference. But ultimately, we can't do that if we don't have sustainable businesses. Absolutely. And there is nothing to be embarrassed about or ashamed about of being a profitable business, as long as you're treating your team well and they're engaged. And we don't have to pay them, you haven't got to pay them sky high rates that are going to make it unsustainable. But if they have the knowledge of where your business is operating and they understand the fundamentals of it, this will make that conversation easier. If you haven't been doing that, that's not to say you can't start. And in that scenario, I think you've got to play it carefully, because you don't want to cause any sense of fear. And it's not going to work going in with an unengaged audience and saying, so Lisi, we are losing money, we're going to have to close the business in 3 months. That is not the way. And I've heard it, I've seen people do it. And I'm all for transparency and honesty and truth within your business, but there's some things as a leader, you have to protect your team. And they don't need to know that your business is struggling, and and that isn't just you verbally saying it, it's your behaviors, it's what you say, it's what you do. It comes back to emotional intelligence again, and having that ability to manage your own emotions through this stressful time and communicate effectively. And in that case, it's actually sitting people around and saying, hey, we've noticed that we've got a challenge here. This is the challenge. What do you think we can do about that, Lise? What ideas have you got? What can you bring to the table? Yeah. And I think you might not use their ideas, but the fact that you've asked them makes them feel valued. It makes them much more bought in. And then keeping them involved in that process. And some people are resistant to change. And it's not easy, especially if you're suddenly taking things away from them that they've got used to, that have made their lives easier. But actually having those conversations, and if you need to, having those one-to-one conversations where, again, you don't divulge everything, but you perhaps give them a little bit more information of, look, we're at a point where we're having a few challenges here. We're absolutely going to turn it around. So give them that confidence that you believe that this can be turned around. But to help us through that, I've got to make some hard choices. Yeah. And I think the same with feedback. If we acknowledge that it's hard to give, it's also hard to receive. And in that sense, acknowledging to that team member, like, this is really hard for me as well. Like, don't be afraid to share how you're feeling, but we can work through this together. And it's adopting that win-win mindset with them of like, yes, I know this is going to hurt a little bit for a time being, but I want, you to be in the position you need to be in. I want us to be, and we grow together.
I love this. I love this. Now, I know we're going to dive deeper into the next episode on a few more steps of this. In the meantime, as we wrap this up, you touched on something earlier that I think is truly, truly, truly important. Now is not the time to keep your head in the sand. Now is the time to look all around, to determine where you're at, to see where you're going, and to quite frankly, take action. Imperfect action, but action all the same. I love it. I love it. I love it. So y'all, now if you've been listening to us or watching us, please make sure you follow, share this with fellow studio owners, drop us a line and tell us, how you've enjoyed this. We're so grateful you're taking the time and enjoying the business of boutique fitness with us. Y'all have a great one.